the 6th day of March 2022. Welcome to the video. We got a lot to cover. Got 170 plus headlines and blah blah blahs from each of those to get through. Oh man, it never ends. It's called a misery machine. It's officially in overdrive. International Atomic Energy Agency. It's just another subsidy of United Nations. They got an agency for everything. In fact, you're not allowed to do anything unless the United Nations gave you your okay to go ahead and do it. Rubio implementing a no-fly zone over Ukraine. We'll start off with Ukraine and we'll get to Fukushima news coming up later. Implementing a no-fly zone over Ukraine means starting World War III. World War III. Like, what is a no-fly zone anyways? Most people think it's something, right? NATO nations have green light to send jets to Ukraine. NATO nations. That's a pretty provocative headlines, particularly when you talk about a no-go zone means a war. That I'll explain that story after this story here. NATO nations gave a green light to send fighter jets, and of course fighter jets come with what? Missiles and bombs, budgets, you need special mechanics, arms, people, you know, the military industrial complex to come with it. NATO countries supporting Ukraine against the Russian invasion, supporting Ukraine. It's a pretty interesting way to frame gone to war against Russia. Have a green light to send fighter jets as part of their military aid. You know, like toilet paper, tongue depressors, fighter jets. Ukraine's military has used fighter jets, drones, and anti-aircraft systems from 14 countries, no less. Of course, NATO, United Nations countries. NATO is 30 military industrial complexes, and United Nations is 193. Largely supplied by NATO. Ukraine military is using fighter jets, drones, anti-aircraft systems, largely supplied by NATO. That's NATO. NATO's actually gone to war there. They're just a little slow announcing it. Try to sneak one in on the Ruskies. To down the Russian aircraft bombing the area. Okay, so implementing a no-fly zone over Ukraine means starting World War III. Would result in World War III, noting that he's not sure a lot of people fully understand what a no-go zone entails. It means flying the AWACS 24 hours a day. It means the willingness to shoot down and engage Russian airplanes in dogfights in the sky. It means, frankly, you can't put those planes up there unless they're willing to knock out the anti-aircraft systems the Russians have deployed, and not just in Ukraine, but Russia and also in Belarus. You know, going to war. So basically a no-fly zone, if people understand what it means World War III. And they put down World War II. Look at that. It means starting World War III. Rubio said. It's not some rule you pass that everybody's obliged by. It's the willingness to shoot down the aircrafts of the Russian Federation, which is basically the beginning of World War III. At a secret airfield in Eastern Europe, a multinational effort to send weapons to Ukraine proceeds at high speed. Chairman and Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is United States of America, General Mark Milley went last week to an undisclosed airfield near the Ukraine border to become a hub for shipping weapons. A hub for shipping weapons into Ukraine. So you got the military-industrial complex, Joint Chief of Staff, General, confirming they're shipping weapons in. Seen firsthand multinational national efforts to get weapons into Ukraine and amid Russia's unprovoked invasion. And they're experts, they know what unprovoked is, like Iraq and Afghanistan, unprovoked, right? Like Syria and etc., etc. The site has become a beehive of activity in recent days, going from a handful of flights each day to as many as 17, which is the maximum the field can handle. The airport's location remains a secret to protect the shipments of weapons, including, you guessed it, anti-armor missiles, so good for planes, jet fighters, tanks, into Ukraine. And Canada is shipping as many as they can get over there. Who's supposed to be a peace country, here we are now at war with Russia because of a despicable inbreed known as the disaster Justin Trudeau here in Canada. Since even before, he was a drama teacher for middle school students. Now he's gone to war against Russia. It defies any kind of rationale. Even before Russia's invasion began late last month, the skies above Europe have been filled with military cargo aircraft of the US and others, particularly C-17s, the backbone of the US airlift fleet. So even before the Russian invasion began, they were shipping weapons over to Ukraine. Before Russia invasion began last month. That should give us a whole bunch of confidence, shouldn't it? U.S. European Command, the EURCOM, is at the heart of the massive shipment, using its liaison networks with allies and partners to coordinate in real time to send materials into Ukraine, a second defense official said. EUCOM is also coordinating with other countries, including United Kingdom. Since Russia invasion began, 14 countries have sent security assistance. I never heard it referred that way before. Security assistance. You know, like shoulder-launched missiles and rocket grenades and, security assistance. The components that have been delivered include the most needed capabilities like anti-armor capabilities. Okay, so you're shipping all this stuff into a country that has a very tiny military. You're arming grandma and grandpas who've never had a fist fight in their lives and with weapons. Once in possession of the weapons, Ukrainians have used them to slow and stall the Russian assault. Well, first off, the Russians are still in idling speed. They haven't kicked it up a notch yet. And Russia can go up a couple of thousand notches before everybody stops being amazed. They got so much weaponry. They haven't unleashed nothing yet. A massive Russian convoy spanning 40 miles of road, 40 miles long is what they're employing, north of Kiev, Ukraine's capital, barely moved in days due to resistance fighters, apparently. And the speed at which the U.S. now delivers weapons to Ukraine is dramatically faster than just 2 months ago. 2 months ago. Like 40 days, 30 to 40 days before Russia invaded. Meanwhile, which is why you can see Russia went ahead and invaded, the complete $350 million package, and so Russia's seen this very provocative deployment of weapons to their borders and have warned Americans, you better back off, bitch. And they didn't, and so now it's game on, and you can kiss this planet goodbye. But the official, described as the largest presidential drawdown in history, should be completed within days or weeks at the most. Okay, Brazilian politicians' sexist remarks about women fleeing Ukraine sparks outrage. So 35-year-old Zerl inbreed gets a job with the government as a politician because of who he's to family, not because of his brilliance. Disgustingly described fleeing Ukrainian women as easy and total goddesses, which is true in many senses. During a recent trip to that doesn't mean they're not distressed and victims. I'm not defending this person. Obviously, he's a scumbag. Trip to the war-ravaged nation. See, never seen nothing like it in terms of beautiful girls. White Anglo-Saxons is what he's trying to refer to. And it's one of the first times we've seen an attack upon a white Anglo-Saxon type Caucasians. You know, there was the Bosnia, and that was nothing but war crimes. That, of course, the Chechen, which is, again was Russian involvement heavily. Hard cases is all I can say. Just unbelievable, dude. As soon as the war's over, he said, I'm going back. And the wife of Ukraine's former ambassador to Brazil condemned the politician and said, show some respect, you punk. Well, that's the whole point, and it is a punk, but he's a politician. That's a punk. That's normal, isn't it? That's the way it is. So probably some confusion here tonight on the poll. And so some countries do surrender. Rather than destroy 30 or 40 million people's entire legacy and pensions, you know, you surrender rather than destroying their pensions and their life savings and their bond with the land and the graveyards and the community. And people are how do you put it? People are a part of the land where they're born and raised, and that the water that created you, where you were conceived typically, is the elements of your body, is that water itself. You are bonded by the water from the community you were born in. You were, that is a part of you, whether you accept that or not. That is your genetic makeup, right? Is made from that particular water from that area. And so when you drive people from their homes, you also destroy a large part of them that the world still has very little understanding of. So should Ukraine surrender to Russia? I wasn't going to put should Russia surrender to Ukraine, but everybody would make fun of me. And so I thought about it and I was like, maybe I'll go should Ukraine surrender to Russia? But rather than destroy 40 million people's 1,000-year legacy, rather destroy all the infrastructure of the country and all hope for 30 million people, 30 plus million people. And the politician doesn't care about you. Don't think for a second they do. They could care less about the victims. I'll explain that at the end of the show tonight, actually. Should Ukraine surrender to Russia? I think they should surrender rather than destroy 35 million people's legacy. And people have a bond to the graveyards too, you know. And it's a terrible thing to drive people away from that kind of a bond. It's a selfish thing to do, really. And it's the military-industrial complex is doing all of this. And there is no arguments that will stop this. There's no binding United Nations order that will stop it. It'll just create more, right? Remember, United Nations first big stunt was going in and flattening North Korea, where 3 million dead, 10 million wounded, and burnt down every community in the country, and then land, sea, air embargoes for over 60 years. The whole story is absurd, really, and there's supposed to be some peace organization. There are 193 militaries. This is what they do. This is normal for them. They're the useless part of our society, is the military. They're not defenders, they're destroyers. You can't call them anything less. They've lost their way a very long time ago. Should Ukraine surrender to Russia? Of course they should. They're not going to beat Russia. Ukraine is not going to beat Russia, period. You can send them all the Stinger missiles, all the Javelin missiles, all the rocket grenades, all the equipment, jet fighters. It doesn't matter. You're not going to beat Russia. And if you beat Russia, it won't really matter. You got the whole world now. Prices are climbing on everything, particularly oil, everything else. In a planet that is extremely vulnerable after 2 years of a scamdemic. This is the tipping point, isn't it? I'll keep going here. It's the tipping point, though. We're looking at the tipping point. Should Ukraine surrender to Russia? That would be the moral and ethical thing to do. If they can't win, they're not even trying. They don't have the capacity. Russia hasn't even cranked it up yet. The hell was that? Hang on, I gotta get something better than that before I move on. You can't have shit like that. Oh, crap, that's not gonna work. One more time. We got a lot of news to get to, Dana. Stop frigging around. I know, hang on. Bear with me. Which one is it I like? Oh yeah, the finger move. There you go. All is good. Here we go. Let's rock it. Stakes rise. Putin says his war in Ukraine will continue. His war. Really? You really think it's his and not the military-industrial manufacturing machine's war? Over 1.5 million people have been displaced? Yeah, well, that's what war does. You didn't care when you displaced 28 million Afghanistans to get 10,000 Taliban. What do you care about that? United Nations. Get used to that, because that's not going to stop for the whole show. Yet to bring a fraction of its artillery, electronic warfare, drones, and combat aircraft capabilities to bear. Yeah, that's right. It hasn't even got a fraction of a percent of its capacity. They're just sitting there idling, waiting for Russia and America to do something stupid, and so they can get on with it. This is annihilation coming our way, I think. U.S. considers ban on Russia oil imports, which is going to raise the price of oil dramatically now. And I mean dramatically. That's not going to affect rich people. That's only going to affect the other 90% of the population that can't afford a bang like that. These are places in the red where Russia's allegedly tore up the earth, so to speak. Saskatoon March calls for a no-fly zone over Ukraine. So there's oodles and oodles and oodles of useful idiots out there, so the military-industrial complex can use stuff like this and get all the media to start pumping stories like that. And next thing you know, NATO is kicking the can out of the solar system. Proud band of Ukrainian troops hold Russian assault at bay. Really? You think that if Russia doesn't want to walk through them, they will? You can't beat them. The only option, in order to save the country in endless suffering, the prime minister or the president of the country needs to wave the flag, to throw in the towel. He needs to surrender. And what's Russia going to do then? Are they going to keep bombing the country? Of course not. And we're like, oh crap, they surrendered? Really? We're gonna bomb them into the Stone Age. They freaking surrendered. Nice move there, scumbag. It's like we're all Ukraine. South Florida continues showing solidarity with Ukraine. And the media has been instructed to pump that stuff out there. Sting sings his 1985 Ruski song amid Ukraine war. Never thought it would be relevant again till Fox called me up and asked me to sing it. Capitol rally crowd urges stronger action and solidarity with Ukraine. You always hearing this saying, with Ukraine. We stand with Ukraine. We're with Ukraine. You always see this connotation in all kinds of headlines now. A San Antonio bakery raised $70,000 for Ukraine by donating their proceeds for a weekend. Ukraine got money coming from every direction, from mom, pop, little children are dumping out their piggy banks and sending it to Ukraine. UK injects $100 million to Ukraine's economy as Canadians and Dutch prime ministers are welcomed to Downing Street to Boris Johnson. Well, like, I'm not a betting man, but you got Justin Trudeau from Canada, Boris Johnson, and Norway Prime Minister, or Dutch Prime Minister. Boris and Justin Trudeau from Canada. I got a story about that coming up. I'll wait. Local ski resorts aid humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. We've never seen nothing like this before, where we got every mom and pop worldwide trying to raise money, nickels and dimes, whatever, and donating it to some phantoms in Ukraine. The ski resort raised $10,000 for Children's Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund. I see all the orphanages with deformed, disfigured children because of Chernobyl have been abandoned, basically. They'll starve to death and nobody will ever mention it. 2 reactors operational at Zapor blah blah plant in Ukraine, the one that was allegedly, and you'll see a lot of those headlines coming up about nuclear power plant attacked. It was a total they probably set off the little fires themselves, right? Prime Minister's chilling warning to Australia on the arc of autocracy amid China-Russia. Scott Morrison will warn Australians the autocratic dictators threatens to reset the world order. Reset the world order. Well, a really interesting way of phrasing the world, a new world order. In a clear reference to the risk of China following Russia's lead and launching assaults on democratic countries in our regions. To the risk of China following Russia's lead. So he's going to address Australia, and this is one of the things he's going to tell them. The Prime Minister will say the nation now faces its most dangerous and challenging security environment in 8 years. In other words, martial law's coming for Australia. You got to give up your toothpicks now because they're weapons too. You can't have forks or knives because they're weapons. Saskatoon March calls for no-fly zone over Ukraine. Saskatoon is Canada. Ukraine war latest. U.S. says Russia missile launches more frequent. Doesn't Joe Biden look like death right there? Isn't that the very... He doesn't even look like Joe Biden, does he? Definitely looks like a lizard, for sure. ABC reporter Tom Joyner responds to article about tone-deaf Ukraine massage. ABC reporter who coped criticism for posting, and that's a play on words, coped, Criticism for posting about getting a massage in an under siege Ukraine. Reporter was down there to report the war and went and got a massage. Ukrainians supporters rally outside Russian consulate in Toronto, Canada. Well, 3 weeks ago, Justin Trudeau enacted martial law in Canada because of protesters. Now every town got protesters, and the police are nowhere to be seen. Oh no, they're trying to help Ukraine. Ukraine invasion. Netflix, American Express, and TikTok cut services in Russia. What a long list we got of them. Just about everybody told Russia to get lost. Sorry. Remember the old cliche where they're going to get a chip in everybody. If you don't get along, they're going to turn off your chip and you can't go to McDonald's or anywhere else. Can't get on a train, a bus, or a plane because your chip won't work. That's what they're doing to Russia right now. They're turning off the chip. We've been covering it for the last 3 or 4 shows. And that's what we're seeing anyway. Russia halts evacuation for second time. And you got bombs going off. Everybody's hitting the ground. Of course, media got to be there to see that for sure. Heartbreaking. Burlington City Hall Square packed for rally. Heartbreaking. Burlington City. We stand with Ukraine. What does that even mean? Just give NATO permission to go bomb Ukraine? Because that's what setting up a no-fly zone means, basically. Let's go to war. You don't want to go to war with Russia. You don't want that smoke. Bolshoi Theater's chief conductor quits after pressure to condemn Ukraine invasion. He's an orchestra conductor, and he wouldn't go publicly and spit and say, you're terrible, and so he has no choice but to quit. Chief conductor Moscow's prestigious theater announced on Sunday he's quitting his job after coming under pressure to condemn the Russian... Oh, well, everybody's under pressure. Huge pressure. Zelensky's wife begs the media to tell the terrible truth that Ruskies are killing kids. Hard cases. Show these photos to the Russian women. Your husbands and brothers and compatriots are killing Ukrainian children. They got a big public relation firm behind this war, by the way. They always show us the same picture of her. Whatever. Ukrainian urges 70 tech firms to help in digital fight against Russia. Because her husband should surrender rather than have the country destroyed and the pensions destroyed and the livelihood and the memories and legacies of the people that built the country and fought for the country, and this chicken neck hiding away is going to let the country be destroyed so it can never be rebuilt, and it'll be just ashes left there at this stage we're looking at now, because NATO is coming in the next couple of days. It's going to get ugly. Ukraine urges 70 tech firms to help in digital fight. Jesus, you can't expect Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Google to do any more than they're already doing. They're doing everything you asked them. They censor the shit out of everything now. And just in the suspension of Russia operation by PayPal and others, Apple has suspended sales of its iPhones there and other products in Russia. And American software company Microsoft and Oracle have made similar moves. So is everybody else. Everybody else. McDonald's, you name it. All possible means of communications are being deployed. Spanning social media, messengers, websites, push notifications, banner ads, video ads, everything. They have a well-greased military-industrial complex public relation firm from all the NATO countries going full snot. And they're probably here in our comments section on a regular basis in the last few shows. Not here yet, but they'll be along. Oh, planet, we're in real trouble. We're in real trouble here on this planet because of this chicken neck economic form. The campaign includes phone calls to Russia citizens containing recorded messages from Ukrainian president, with the overall outreach extending to 50 million people a day. 50 million robot calls a day. That's a weapon and a half there. Hearts and mind like you've never seen. All done by a push of a button. Food truck fundraisers feeding Calgarians raise money for Ukraine. And we're seeing just so many of these bizarre stories. Like I say, kids dumping out their piggy bank for Ukraine so they can buy weapons to fight the dirty Ruskies. And who gets the money is the weapons manufacturer. If you give them lots of money, what do? Make more weapons? Yeah. Local non-profit asking for donations to support Ukraine refugees. The West squeezes Putin. I mean, the victims are real, don't get me wrong. It's the military-industrial complex and their puppets known as politicians in normal language. West squeezes Putin as Russia intensifies war. West squeezes Putin as Russia intensifies war in neighboring Ukraine. And so they're going around trying to seize Russian oligarchs' assets right around the world. The stories are coming up. Deep End Antique raises $542 for Ukraine. So they can buy weapons to fight from the weapons manufacturer to fight the Ruskies. Man travels 5,000 miles and plays piano for the Ukraine refugees. And bless his heart, I suppose. Tearful Shevchenko pleads with Italy to open hearts to Ukraine. He's a famous sports. They got all kinds of these famous, so-called famous people who work for corporations and make a lot of money. They're the famous ones. Not people that create things, but the guy can bat a ball, or the guy can kick a ball, or the guy can throw a ball. Ukraine invasion spikes gas prices in Portland. Gas just shot up 20 cents a liter down here. So it's almost $2. Well, it is $2 a liter, which is $8 a gallon, which is inconceivable. 2 years ago, it was 70-something cents a liter. Russian gymnast slammed for war symbol on the podium. Somebody taped a Z on his chest, which is a Russian symbolic for freedom. And it's a symbol supporters of the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, have won war. And have you ever seen a campaign for Vladimir Putin over there where he's kissing tigers and playing with alligators and diving in mountain streams from helicopters to get fish with his bare hands, riding on horses with his shirt wide open? It's absurd, really. Ukraine's Zelensky implores sanctions are not enough. He wants the whole world to fight this battle for him and get rid of the great enemy of all of humankind, Russia. I'm sorry, Putin. Vladimir Putin, whose parents worked for Stalin. His dad was military with Stalin, and then his mom was a nurse cutting off arms and legs, of course, and he grew up in that environment. This was the norm for him. Then he came, because he was an insider, became a KGB top paid and a spy. Now, for 23 plus years, he's a dictator in a throwback country. International volunteers pick up arms and heads for battle. Imagine if this was Ukraine, where everybody was headed to, or Taliban, where everybody was headed to help the Taliban. Saskatoon artist links locals to raise money for Ukraine. That's Canada. Meet the ministers leading the way on Canada's Ukraine response. Leading the way. Canada is not supposed to be going to war against Russia. Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister, Foreign Affairs Minister, National Defense Minister are shaping Canada's responses to an extraordinarily geopolitical crisis. This is not a crisis. This is a manufactured crisis, but it's not a crisis. So, Canada's ready to lay out its response to Russia's invasion? Prime Minister which is shipping shoulder-launched missiles, anti-tank missiles, thousands and thousands of them, to civilians. It's unprecedented. He doesn't have the authority to do stuff like this, as far as I know. You got to go to Parliament and get the vote of the Parliament. You have to declare a war in order to do stuff like this. Prime Minister, which is laughable, Justin Trudeau turned to the three women holding the most powerful roles in his cabinet. What a fucking piece of shit he turned out to be. Excuse the language. What a despicable sack of shit, disgusting parasite he turned out to be. Ukraine and Russia to face off at the World Court over genocide claim. A pro bono lawyer group in the United States has filed a genocide claim with, you guessed it, United Nations. This is The Hague. There's another trial going on in The Hague too for the scamdemic, the coronavirus scamdemic. But not in this building. But it is by lawyers and a judge, shown that the whole world has been hoodwinked. And that could be why they're kicking off the war, to drown out. They're supposed to be going to the international courts themselves, people like Bill Gates included. A general view of the International Court of Justice in The Hague, which is, United Nations. Ukraine will ash the United Nations. What a freaking despicable creature this is. The United Nations, which is 193 militaries, has turned out to be. It's just despicable. You've ruined the planet on everybody. You're idiots. Top court on Monday to issue an emergency ruling requiring Russia to stop its invasion. Requiring Russia to stop its invasion. Arguing Moscow's justification for the attack is based on a faulty interpretation of the genocide law. A faulty interpretation of genocide law. Although the court's rulings are binding and countries generally follow them, it has no direct means of enforcing them. That's the United Nations. But every country that is part of it is willing to carry out anything it says. That's the idea of being a part of it. United Nations says something, then the government of the countries has to go ahead and do it. Otherwise, they're sucky babies. The case is lodged. It has lodged at the World Court. the World Court, officially known as the International Court of Justice, that has no jurisdiction and no means of enforcing it. But, the World Court. All the United Nations is like that, but that doesn't mean they don't get their way. More rallies for Ukraine. 2 more rallies for Ukraine held in Canada, Kelowna, on Sunday. If they'd done that 3 weeks ago, the police would have beat the shit out of them under martial law that we had implemented here for asking questions about the coronavirus. Russia is tightening its grip on Ukraine nuclear plants, says UN watchdog. Russia is tightening its grip on Ukraine nuclear plant. It could be very well that it was Ukraine who sabotaged the plant, which we're hoping to invoke a heavy response from the world, which it did, as you'll see coming up. Russia forces that seized Ukraine's nuclear power plant have placed staff running the complex under their command and restricted outside communications. The UN nuclear watchdog, which has no jurisdiction, but you'd never know that, which is also known as the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, said it was extremely concerned. Really? Rafael Grossi said he was extremely concerned. That creature, first he should take his blood sample and check it to make sure he's actually a human, and then they should lock him away with no light, no windows, and just feed him water and stale bread till he disappears. UK to send extra money to Kyiv to support Ukraine's indomitable people. UK. Wales Online, indomitable, useful idiots. If you're going to fight a war that you know you can't win, and then the Ukrainians have no voice because the country's in chaos, and they should be surrendering. Because what's Russia going to do then? What happens if the president of Ukraine comes out on his Elon Musk satellite connection and says, "I'm the president of Ukraine, and I hereby declare a surrender. So please stop firing, we surrender. We can't destroy the country and everybody's pensions and patents and everybody's livelihood in 1,000 years of history unless we're going to destroy the rest of the planet at the same time." UK government is set to pump an extra $74 million into Ukraine. $74 million more so they can buy weapons. Prime Minister of Canada and Netherlands will visit London, that's reassuring, and accompany Mr. Boris on a visit to a Royal Air Force base, military-industrial complex. The trio will then hold a joint press conference. Oh boy, can't wait. And the ad provided through the World Bank, the aid is going to be provided through the World Bank because it's a tax write-off, I suppose. Dow futures fall 300 points as oil prices spike to 13-year high on Russia-Ukraine war. That's good news. Arming Ukraine, 17,000 anti-tank weapons in 6 days, and a Palestine cyber corp, 300,000 IT professionals are not going to go out and spook the Russia's cyber. And so a lot of internet is going to get pulled out of there, so there's only a couple of pipelines, and then they can. So they're sending all kinds of French military equipment is unloaded from a freight airplane at a base in Romania. That's going to war against Russia is what you're looking at the time. On a snowy tarmac at Amari Air Base in northern Estonia on Sunday morning, pallets of rifles, munitions, and other weapons like, Stinger missiles, Javelin missiles, rocket grenades were being loaded into one of the largest cargo planes in the world. And in less than a week, the United States and NATO have pushed more than 17,000 anti-tank weapons. Oh, United States and NATO countries, 30 countries, have pushed more than 17,000 anti-tank weapons and Javelin missiles over the borders of Poland and Romania, unloading them from joint military cargo planes so they can make the trip by land to Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, other major cities. So far, Russian forces have been so preoccupied in other parts of the country, they have not targeted the arms supply lines, but few thinks that can last. Well, now it won't, will it? Now that you put that out there. And so Russia wants to get at him, they got to attack him outside the country, see? Or get him when he crossed the border. What do you think is going to happen? Those are only the most visible contributions hid away on bases around Eastern Europe. Forces from the United States Cyber Command, known as Cyber Mission Team, are in place to interfere with the Russia digital attack and communications. So, like internet attack is considered a war. That's considered you've gone to war when you do stuff like this. But measuring the success rate is difficult because they're not going to be bragging about it. In downtown Washington, lobbying groups and law firms have once charged the Ukrainian government handsomely for their services are now working to get the cash cow back up for free. Churchill in a t-shirt. Winston Churchill in a t-shirt rallying his country to war. Washington is manipulating Mr. Zelensky's image to present him as Churchill in a t-shirt, which is exactly what we're seeing, by the way. And Covington and Burling, a major law firm, filed a motion pro bono on behalf of Ukraine in the International Courts of Justice. The military-industrial complex is in full swing, in full motion here, folks. Group rally calls for peace in Ukraine because people are bombarded with this message, so they don't know what to do. They can't sit home and do nothing. The TV's told them they couldn't, so they're gone out now. So media can get a few pictures off social media and make a freaking story out of it. And so that you're bombarded with all these little stories, and then you feel like an outsider if you don't join in. Or if you, God forbid you speak any other narrative but their narrative. Look at me, 35 people on my show. I've been doing for 10 years. Because I don't sing the song that everybody else do. I show you the documentation, then I give you an accurate, hopefully a very, very, hopefully accurate depiction of what's going on so you can make up your own mind. 1,000 march through Chicago. Close the skies. Let's get Third World War on the go and get it over with. That's what closing the sky means. Fear of a rational nuclear launch hangs over Ukraine crisis. The world cannot rely on leaders and military officers to make rational decisions when their fingers are all over the nuclear launch button. New research says. The world cannot rely on leaders and military officers to make rational decisions. Really? Never would have thought that. Chatham House, which is a think tank, which has got its purpose is to influence policy in governments without being part of the government. I couldn't get elected, so I created a think tank and influenced the government that way. Said personal beliefs, based bias, and grievances could cloud the judgments of heads of nuclear armed states during the war in Ukraine. I suspect we're going to see nuclear weapons launched in the next 4 or 5 days. And because Russia's been talking that shit, and Vladimir Putin never talks shit. He doesn't talk shit. He doesn't talk, what's the word for it, I wonder? He doesn't talk down others, right? He's all action. 1.5 million refugees from Ukraine. So now that he's talking, he's not talking shit. This is what I'm saying. 1.5 million refugees from Ukraine. Worst post-World War II crisis. No, it's not. Palestine, 5.5 million evacuees created so Israel can have a bigger chunk of Palestine's land. More than 1.5 million refugees have now fled Ukraine after Russia's invasion, right? Putin's invasion. They love doing that so the country doesn't get blamed. Invasion as police warn sex trafficking gangs are preying on women and children by luring them with promises to live and somewhere to live. No, that's always happens. It's usually the military that's doing it, and then they'll take the victims and set up brothels within 3 or 4 miles of military bases. That's normal operation for a military base, is to kidnap the local population, use them as sex slaves. They need to desensitize the soldiers. Hawaii stands with Ukraine rallies at Magic Island. Hawaii. Well, not Hawaii. It's some people that live in Hawaii. But when you frame it that way, subconsciously the brain says, well, gee, all of Hawaii. But it's not. There's some people in Hawaii, which is, could be very genuine people that are drawn into this, or it could be just public relation firms getting together for a photo op, sticking on social media, and flog it out to all the scumbag mainstream goblins that we call media. Seizing super yachts is one of my favorite stories today. Seizing super yachts of Russians elite to punish. So this is collective punishment, by the way, we're talking about, which is illegal under scumbag United Nations endless fucking conventions and articles and charters. Seizing super yachts of Russia's elite is harder than it sounds. That doesn't mean they're not trying. Politicians around the world are talking shit about taking away the comforts of Russians' wealthy elites. It's the damnedest thing I've ever heard. We've never heard nothing like this. None of this we're listening to tonight. We've never heard nothing like this. All the posturing. Then you find out America's been bringing weapons in for at least 2 months straight. And NATO countries. After the country's invasion. Actually, seizing those assets will be much more difficult, though. But this is what I find really interesting. They're doing something like this. They're isolating everybody in Russia. And it's not just this way. It's McDonald's and Apple and Netflix and fucking, you name it. It's Visa, MasterCards, everybody. Telecommunications, telecoms, internet services. Still, the level of cooperation signaled by governments is unprecedented, as a fact, with parallel sanctions coming down in the European Union, United Kingdom, United States, and a global financial watchdog is discussing an approach to trace Russia money flows to curb sanction evasions. President Ghost administration said Thursday it would sanction 8 wealthy Russians and their families, including billionaires, and unveiling a unit called a klepto capture. Klepto. What a bizarre... Which will complement a transatlantic task force. Taking assets is especially tricky when dealing with Russians, and tycoons amassed the foundations for their wealth decades ago. So you're going after people who made their monies decades ago because of what Russia's doing today. And it shows you that you don't have a functional government at all. You've been captured 100%. Your regulatory agencies have all been captured. That's what you're seeing there. For their wealth decades ago, and have reinvested proceeds from Soviet privatization to legitimate businesses. And And still, courts have held that individuals without a U.S. presence don't have due process rights under the Constitution. Do you get what they're talking about? Oh, you're not even, and if you're America, they can grab you. And if you're not America, they can grab you. Resources and your assets, because you put your fate into them and everything was hunky-dory. And then the president and the country, the military of your country goes to war, and it's your fault. This is lunatic talk. This is guaranteed nuclear war. All of this, you got the whole planet whipped into a friggin' frenzy now. In what, 12 days? Stocks in Germany, UK, France, Italy, and Spain plunged below year 2000 level. Buy and hold horror show. It's not supposed to be there. Recent Tonga volcano eruption won't cool the climate much, study says. There's 4.3 million studies produced in North America each year. 4.3 million studies paid for by taxpayers and then locked away behind a paywall at Ulster, Springer and Wiley. They have 22,000 of the biggest journals on the planet. They get studies for free, put you behind a paywall, and the family of the people that create the study can't even see it, let alone the people that paid for it. They know what's going on and going down. They have it all locked away on top of the ash and gas is released by the volcano eruption can have a cooling effect on the global climate. No, it doesn't. Not like radiation does. Then if that's there, which is an accident, then there's a big bang though. That's not for the night show. Widow spider caught feeding and protected bats for the first time. It's because there's no insects in a large part of the world. Now the insects disappeared because of Fukushima radioactive fallout. So now they got to feed on little birds and bats, right? It's not that they got to feed, but that's the only thing to land in their webs. What the war in Ukraine means for the world's food supply. And that's another thing because of it's hard to believe it, but they pulled the pin on this population genocide machine that we've heard so much about in the last couple of decades. Now they went ahead and done it. What the war in Ukraine means for the world food supply. I love these kinds of people. They're so freaking clever. Look at the food that they got gathered up there. It's amazing, really. As we watch Ukrainian refugees arrive by car and foot in Poland, it's hard not to recall World War II, when the region was ravaged by fighting and famine spread and millions of Ukrainians died of starvation. And after the breakup of the Soviet Union, Ukraine and Russia were net grain importers. Now the two countries account for 29% of the global export of wheat. They also contribute 19% of the global corn and 80% of the global sunflower oil exports. Like, you shouldn't eat anything out of Belarus, and you shouldn't eat anything out of Ukraine because of Chernobyl. That was ground zero. They closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom because of Chernobyl 3,000 miles away. So how do you think ground zero is going to be? Just saying it like it is. We will win. Former Miss Ukraine message to inspire people. She plays airsoft, and so she got her picture taken and posted online and blew up, right? She's not out there fighting. Now, I'm not military, just a woman, just a normal human, just a person, like all people of my country. The chicken that they're in full scream ahead. 5 nations, it's 14 nations actually. 5 nations provide military assistance to Ukraine. It was 14 that we know about, all NATO countries. Finland, Sweden, Norway, Luxembourg, and Austria. We know Finland and Norway have shipped... I got a list of it here. Because we covered that first or second show. Right away, we're shipping anti-tank single-launch shoulder pull and just throw away the gun after. Finland provided 1,600 disposable RPGs, rocket launchers. Sweden is handing over 5,000 anti-tank weapons. Right? And Switzerland and Canada is headed down to meet up with, of all people, Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom. No good is going to come of that, I can assure you. Norway's made an exceptional decision in support of Ukraine and sending 2,000 anti-tank grenade launchers. Luxembourg is providing Ukraine with anti-tank weapons. That's the same thing as going to war against Russia, and that's how Russia's going to see it. And pumping it out there in the media means Russia's going to see it. We're setting the stage for a world catastrophe, aren't we? Ukraine's ambassador to the United States says Russia used a vacuum bomb on Monday. A vacuum bomb releases all kinds of fine particulates, and then it ignites it, and that sucks in all the surrounding air, and it causes a much longer detonation. Excuse me. They used a vacuum bomb today, which is actually prohibited by the Geneva Convention. Okay, well, the people who produce it drag them into criminal courts and try them for crimes against humanity, because you shouldn't create it if it's illegal. And then go after the rest of them. What are vacuum bombs that Ukraine claims Russia used amid invasion, and how do they work? The thermobaric weapons, I just explained it to you basically in a nutshell. Sucks in the oxygen from surrounding air to generate a high temperature explosion. The blast produced by the bomb is significantly longer in duration as compared to conventional explosives. It's capable of vaporizing humans. It's just great. There'll be no evidence. Anyway, Ukraine's First Lady takes a stand amid the Russian invasion. I will not have panic and tears, says the stoic lady from her bomb shelter. Her husband, the president, Zelensky, said she and her kids are also targeted by Russian assassins. Russia seizes Ukraine's nuclear plants hours after the attack. What do you think they were going to do? Russia forced to seize Europe's biggest nuclear power plant in Ukraine, caught fire overnight, which it didn't, by the way. Russia's defense ministry has blamed the attack on the site of Ukrainian sabotagers, calling it a monstrous provocation. Agent provocateurs, I'm just trying to say something. The agent provocateur has been used time and time again. And you'll see him in big demonstrations where you have a group of guys will disguise their faces, and they're usually carrying backpacks and wearing the same kind of boots. And they'll go in, they'll break glasses in the bank's windows, and then all the media is right there on the corner. They'll show up, break the glass. All the media go click, 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 click. And then they'll run home or run to the office and tell this story of the violent protesters. Then the police are waiting around the corner. The riot police will come in and bust everybody's head up, arrest everybody, and they'll use that agent provocateurs, but it's usually them. Russia forced to seize control of the nuclear plant, fire extinguished. They kept that lie alive the whole weekend. I fell for it on Thursday's show. What you need to know, Russia has begun shelling a nuclear power plant. Really? You think Russia really was shelling a nuclear power plant? Well, you got most people believing that, though, don't you? Scumbags. Incredible scumbags. Portland rally in support of Ukraine draws crowd of 100. They're strong over there, boy. Portland rally in support of Ukraine draws a crowd of 100. I thought you weren't allowed to get together in crowds anymore. They're actually going to remove restrictions here on the 14th. So on the 14th, I can get my hair cut, maybe. Or the 15th. You can't get your hair cut down here unless you got a vaccine passport. And I ain't getting no vaccine passport. Ain't sticking that shit into me. We anticipate they're all dead. Said the civilians who were trying to protect a nuclear power plant in his home city. Hands off our Ukraine. Close the sky above Ukraine, which is starting the Third World War, right? This disaster. Should Canada be doing more to help Ukraine? If he could, he would. If he could sacrifice every Canadian so that Ukraine has a day, he would in a heartbeat. Russia attacks Ukraine nuclear plant, which wasn't true. But my God, the media constantly with this story. The Philadelphia Inquirer. Huron Valley guns selling defensive tactical gear you can buy for Ukraine to be shipped overseas. That's something I'd never do because you know bloody well where the money is not going to be going. It's selling defensive supplies at cost to help Ukraine war effort. These are the strangest stories. We've seen so many stories like this. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. There's nothing in history to compare it to. We've never seen any kind of mass psychosis that comes close. We've seen lots of mass psychosis, but nothing that comes close to what we're seeing in the last 12 days with the medias. We're outfitted 40 or 50 soldiers with this type of gear. And then our customers have probably brought $5,000 to $10,000 worth of product to help the people. The weapons manufacturer companies are just, they obviously orchestrated most of this. Are banking it like you can't even imagine. This is a war to destroy Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language. And the only thing they did wrong was to have a democracy next to a dictatorship. All the cliches today, baby. Elon Musk warning over SpaceX Starlink systems in Ukraine used with cautions. He sent down thousands of his satellite link boxes now. Ukraine's nuclear power plant on fire, which it wasn't. These are big sites. This was like a workshop area. I think, by the looks of everything, it looks like they done it themselves and blamed it on Russia. NWA coffee shop raises money for a family in Ukraine. Endless stories like that. I can't possibly keep up with it. Asia stock slides on reported nuclear power plant attack in Ukraine. It's all emblematic of the coronavirus in one way, though. Russia's capture of Europe's largest, when it originally happened, all the media was right on board, baby, like hot. So all the media is going to have to get a Ukrainian-Russia little section at the top of their pages now, like they've done with the corona, the despicable scamdemic. Russia has captured Europe's largest nuclear plant in Ukraine, raises global alarm. Yeah, I suppose it did when all the media's out there screaming that they were shelling a nuclear power plant. That was all done on purpose to cause this kind of response in the media. Now they can fight about it when there's nothing actually happened. Russia's capture of Europe's largest nuclear power plant. I think they're going to walk past it. The U.S. Embassy in Ukraine has called Russia's attack on a nuclear plant a war crime. The U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, still going strong. CBC, which is Canada's scumbag Canadian government propaganda media. CNN, which is degenerate monsters. Bloomberg, which is scum cowards, say they're suspending reporting from journalists in Russia due to a new law that could place them in a jail. And that Bombardier and, Bombardier, Skidoos and everything else, ATVs and Canadian Tire, which is huge industrial, they're kind of like a Walmart in one sense, have suspended all Russian-linked operations due to the Ukraine invasion. Pizza Huts and Walmart and everybody else is pulled out of there. Day 8 fire breaks out near Ukraine nuclear power plant. Near the power plant. See, that's one of the few headlines that was objective. Is the U.S. providing Ukraine with targeting intel? Maybe. What I think Russia thinks when they read this. When the Manchurian candidate known as Vladimir Putin gets his briefing, he's going to see stuff like that, right? Very good. Their plan is coming together perfectly. We've continued and consistently shared a significant amount of detail. This was Psaki at the White House. We've continued and consistently shared a significant amount of detailed, timely intelligence on Russia's plans and activities. Plans. And activities with the Ukrainian government to help Ukrainians defend themselves, including information that should help them inform and develop their military response. That's what's happening or has been happening, she said. AKA, yep, we're providing Ukraine with targeting intelligence. That's not going to blow back at all. Russia forces in control at a nuclear plant. Peoria business sends bulletproof vest, tactical gear to Ukraine. Endless amount of this now. It's going to probably get worse even. The company already has ongoing contracts with federal agencies and militaries across the globe. Real friendly. Making the process a little easier, said the scumbags. More than 2,000 bulletproof vests to Ukraine. Says he has a goal of sending 7,000 more within the next month. Says it's a simple decision for him and one he hopes will save lives. See, this is how the military gets around declaring a war. They get all these entities that supplies the military shipping gear and it's considered just random, but it's not. Attack on a nuclear site, a dangerous new escalation in Russia's invasion, the U.S. says. Really, no one predicted that was going to happen? It wasn't an attack on a nuclear site. It was an attack to the nuclear site. It was a fight to get the nuclear site. There's a difference. Live updates. UN Council meet on humanitarian situation. Because if they got a meltdown, that's going to change everything, see? They're already on, Russia's under siege. Russia is actually under siege. Sustained siege from every country worldwide. Land, sea, and air embargoes against Russia from everything on the planet. Except for Belarus, which is right next door to it. UN Council to meet on humanitarian situation. UN, United Nations. 193 militaries. Oil surges, multi-year highs. It's not going to slow down. It's got a ways to go before it starts, hopefully, reversing at some point. U.S. crude gained 26%. These are absurd numbers. Russia-Ukraine crisis replaces COVID-19 scamdemic as top risk to global supply chain, Moody. UN rights body approves investigation to alleged Russian violations in Ukraine. UN, United Nations. The Kiev alleged war crimes against humanity, all under the United Nations Charter. United Nations is just a military-industrial complex. They're controlled opposition, right? The world stands with Ukraine. Really? Like, has anybody got a choice? I don't stand with anybody. I think you're all friggin' idiots. These people in particular I'm talking about, obviously. New market to hold multi-fate prayer vigil for Russian invaded country, March the 6th. So much of that kind of headlines is... The media is now 100% unequivocally fixated on brainwashing every individual they can trick. Fire out a key Ukraine nuclear plant after Russia attack, no radiation released. After Russia attack, see how, like Fox 4, that's big media, multi-millions of people. Mobile World Congress draws large crowd despite Ukraine conflict. I just despise these organizations. More than 60,000 people gathered in a Spanish city in Barcelona. Oh yeah, before the start, it said a handful of Russian firms and people would be banned because of sanctions. It's the most bizarre thing imaginable. It doesn't matter that you got nothing to do with this. If your nationality is Russia, they're coming after you. I've never even heard tell of anything like this in my life. Never even conceived it. We're seeing it now in real time escalate into every facet. It's total disregard. The cure is 1,000,000 times worse than the illness. Ukraine invasion, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, degenerate monster reject Gordon Brown, who was told by the Queen to step the frig down, calls for special tribunal to punish Vladimir Putin. You better be careful there, Gordon. Russia will turn around and nuke the shit out of you. How the U.S. is keeping Ukraine. How the U.S. is helping Ukraine fight Russia. There's every way you can imagine. There's nothing the military-industrial complex, America won't do. A U.S. military vehicle with a laser projector on the top of its roof is stopped in southeastern Poland near the border with Ukraine. That's a laser they got on the roof of that thing. Washington has reportedly sent hundreds of Stinger missiles. Anybody really think it's just hundreds? From what we've seen earlier, several thousand minimum. From Ukraine to Hollywood, how Mila Kunis, Jewish parents, fled to L.A. with $250 to escape the Soviet anti-Semitism when she was 7, and 2 years later used her meager savings to pay for her acting classes that launched her career. She should get her money back. Richmond Council declares support for the people of Ukraine. richmondgovernment.uk site. So all the lapdogs and bootlickers are following suit down there. 164 Nobel laureates call on Russia to withdraw from Ukraine. These are the same people who never opened their mouth when Fukushima destroyed the food chain worldwide. Trudeau calls for stops to attack on nuclear plant in Ukraine. God help us that what are we going to do with this creature known as Justin Trudeau, for God's sakes? Euro tumbles further after news of fire at Ukrainian nuclear plant. French nuclear watchdog on high alert after nuclear plant fire. So they were really fear-mongering in overdrive, weren't they? Commodities are soaring now as anxiety over supply shortages increases. You can see the prices just friggin' rocketing. It's crazy. Ukraine president urges Russians to protest over attack on nuclear plant. Ukrainian president, he's like a maestro with an orchestra. The whole world is his orchestra. And he's telling everybody what to do. Facebook got to ban Russia. Twitter better ban Russia. Instagram got to ban Russia. YouTube ban Russia. Bill Gates ban Russia. Kick him off the internet. I want everybody to fight my... He should resign. Yeah. He should surrender rather than destroy his country. Bringing all these weapons in, giving the people that don't know what they're doing for another couple of days. Oh, we got a change of the votes here, have we? So now we got 53% of the people says Ukraine should surrender to Russia. Because what's going to happen if they don't surrender is Russia's going to flatten Ukraine. If they surrender, then Russia can't flatten Ukraine, and NATO has to go back to sleep till the next kick they get at the can. It's madness. UK seeks investors for nuclear plant as it eases out of China. So what? You're going to kick China out? Which is the most bizarre thing anyway, right? You can't build their own plant, so they got China, who they're stocking all the time with nuclear submarines. The UN seeks investors for nuclear plant. Journalists in 50-plus countries. That's a far cry, journalists. Useful idiots in 50-plus countries follow the constant flow of money made and lost in oil and gas by tracking emerging trends and opportunities in the future of energy. Yeah, the energy gobblers. About 150 nuclear fuel containers located at the Ukrainian nuclear power plant. Apart from 6 reactors, the plant has spent nuclear fuel storage facilities and about 150 nuclear fuel containers. If the barbarians continue to fire upon the station, which they didn't do, by the way, and hit those containers, we will actually have a nuclear disaster. Russia knows what a nuclear power plant is, morons. They're not going to shoot the nuclear power plant up. It's madness, don't get me wrong, but Russia's not going to do that. They're not that stupid. The U.S. puts the doomsday plane into the air this week after putting nuclear threat. The doomsday plane. That's reassuring. The Boeing aircraft designed to serve as an airborne command center for U.S. officials. Can protect the crew from the effects of a nuclear explosion, they claim. Protect the president and high-ranking officials. The rest of you can roast and die, who cares? Monday flight was unusual. The plane was accompanied by 2 Cobra ball jets with the ability to track ballistic missile data. BritBox, which is a streaming service, United Kingdom, pulled a nuclear disaster film Threads. I went and downloaded and watched it this afternoon. Ahead of the Ukraine war after it gave viewers nightmares. That's the nuclear industry done that. Yes. The apocalyptic drama left people so terrified it was rarely repeated on the BBC after it first aired in 1984. Yeah, that was created in 1984 appropriately. With people saying they can't believe it was ever broadcast on the telly. And I think they showed it in schools in the 80s. No wonder the 80s kids were hard as nails. And Threads was about a nuclear attack in Sheffield. which is not that far away from the nuclear meltdown at Sellafield. Put in misery as Zelensky claimed 9,000 dead, and that Belarus abandons Russia, which is not true again. Neither one of them is true. That we got no confirmation of it. Russian authorities deny heavy losses. The state media claiming they lost less than 500. If Ukraine killed 10,000, these are professional Russian soldiers, these are not conscripts. Russia would have opened up on them. Right now, Russia hasn't put their military into first gear. They're just idling along, just pushing everything out of their way. Putin blackmail plot for evacuation of Europe after nuclear plant. So they're claiming now that he's going to melt down the plant so you'll have to evacuate Europe. Which is true, you would, right? Don't get me wrong. I'll show you what I mean. Kind of hard to wrap your mind around it if you're not used to this stuff. This is a 20-day only model. If you let the model go for another 20 days, the rest of the planet disappears. But this model is based upon 20 days of radioactive fallout from Japan's multiple nuclear meltdowns. Covered the whole planet and exterminated most of the species, particularly the small species. And we're doing research expeditions for the last decade on that. Now we got a new nuclear stories going on that we're trying to flush out. That's right, James Lucid got it right. Nuclear war more and more normalized. That's exactly what they're doing. 100%, right? They're conditioning the population to it's inevitable, and then they're going to pull the trigger, and they're going to hope to wipe out the majority of the population by the looks of it. Exclusive Barrister recommends starting a nuclear war with Russia. A lawyer down in the United Kingdom recommends first strike. He said, I'm convinced Putin is going for the nuclear option, and the West must launch a preemptive nuclear attack on Russia first, which is, we're seeing this posturing that says that, by the way. If I was in charge, I would launch a preemptive nuclear attack on Russia tonight. And that's the brilliant Barrister right there. If he was in charge, he'd pop Russia tonight. Scary. The only place in the United Kingdom I do not think that Vladimir Putin or Russia will attack is Scotland. So if you want to feel safe in the next 14 days, I suggest you take a holiday there. Except Scotland would be one of the first places that would be hit because it has fast lane nuclear base there. And they got around 19 nuclear submarines there, that the nuclear reactors, nuclear missiles that they don't know how to decommission. So if they're going to hit that, it's going to be bad. I am convinced Putin is going to go for the nuclear option, and the West must launch. If he was in charge, we'd all be dead already. He dismissed critics who suggested his plan was likely to trigger retaliatory nuclear attacks, a nuclear winter, which is not going to create, by the way, and the end of the civilization, which it is going to create anyway, without the nuclear war. Not all humankind will be destroyed and the planet will remain intact, the Barrister assured his followers. We cannot allow a man with a nuclear weapon to terrorize the world. We are all going to die one day. It's better to die fighting for a just cause than to die in the hands of a coward and a terrorist. For a just cause? Good God, man, have you lost your brain? Ultra-safe nuclear at open fuel producing site in Tennessee, Oak Ridge. Ultra-safe nuclear is Floor, which was part of the Manhattan Project, right? They got the subsidiary genre company that they fired up supposedly for the so-called small modular reactors, which is going to be used in mixed oxide fuel, MOX fuel, where they reclaim uranium, plutoniums, hot particles from missiles and used fuel and liberate it into the environment so they don't have to store it for 1 million years. It's so evil, it defies any logic. It defies reality. The people that make the mixed oxide, like La Hague in France, has over 500 security guards. 500 security guards. Because that's what it takes when you're that evil. This is the fable. They put a nuclear power plant down in the ground and everything goes normal all around it. This is nonsense. It creates so much tritium-3H, which is absorbed by all splitting cell entities on the planet, which is everything. Seattle-based unsafe nuclear reactors, what I call them, said it plans to invest $17 million in the pilot facility over the next 5 years. You can't do anything with $17 million in nuclear industry. You can't even buy the handrails for $17 million. Oh, it's Oak Ridge facility. The scumbag from Oak Ridge. The degenerate monsters from Oak Ridge. Should have known. Russia attacks Ukraine nuclear power plant. No, they didn't. Fury over Russia's attack on Ukraine's nuclear power plant. Yeah, but they didn't attack it. But why let that get in the way? Which can power up to 4 million homes. And so the fuel is still splitting the atoms. And what I mean by that is you get decades of reactor cores, because they can only stay in the reactor for around 14, 16 months. And then most or half of it, at least, will come out of the reactor, and they put more fuel in with the older stuff. And the stuff they took out got to go underwater for a decade to start to try to cool down. They're still splitting the atom. And so these pools were supposed to have a small amount of fuel at a time. Because they have no repositories, the fuel, instead of having a couple of 100 tons, got thousands of tons. Because they don't have a repository. And so the bore rate of water can stop the chain reaction from happening in the pool, but it can't stop the splitting of the atom, and therefore the atoms can't be destroyed by boron, or there wouldn't be an issue in the first place, right? So it's evaporating around 120,000 liters out of each pool, and there's around 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. All day, every day, is about 120,000 liters out of each pool. Each liter could have 1 trillion atoms of fission, uranium, plutonium. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods is going to be curium isotopes. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And plutonium was named after the devil. Curium is the devil. Russia's artillery multiple launch, and all the animals died in all the experiments, by the way. Russian artillery and multiple launch rocket systems were pounding residential buildings. Because that's where they're shooting from, the residential buildings, right? They're going to fire back. And it's the same thing. I'll show you how this works. That's the whole thing about what I do is all you can do is take your time. You can't rush the story. You can't rush the truth, per se. So it's an obscene amount of work, right? Because I'm not allowed... Like, I should just do a radio show where I haven't got to provide the evidence all the time. Because that'll save me at least 10 hours of work every day. Here's one example. So all the little dots you're looking at are current missile silos in the United States. And all of those missile silos are in communities. So if Russia, say, attacks one of those little communities trying to get at the silo, the media worldwide is going to come out and say, Russia just attacked our little farming community. A couple of years later, if we're still around, you'll find out that it was a missile site. So all of these missile silos uses the community they're hosted in as human shields. It's disgusting. Being polite, by the way. It's revolting. NATO rules out a no-fly zone. Ukraine has significant majority of the U.S.'s military aircraft. What the hell? And NATO has ruled out a no-fly zone. Russia's fired more than 500 missiles. There's 17,000 anti-aircraft and anti-tank missiles sent down, given to people that don't even know what the frig they're doing. Russia has the air superiority. And if NATO comes into the game, well, Putin don't like to brag, right? Don't bluff. That's how I see Putin over Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. He's not known to bluff. And he's known to be vicious. Just go ask anybody from Syria. 7 million refugees to get the remnants of 10,000 ISIL. Attack on nuclear site, dangerous new escalation in Russia's invasion. Attack on a nuclear site. This is CBC, the biggest media in Canada, which is the government. They get $1.4 billion a year from taxpayer to manipulate the population. That's their job. They're lunatics. Russia's Ukraine news. Russian invasion finally reached downtown Kiev. Yeah, so you get up in the building and then you shoot at the Ruskies. They fire back at you. So they're shooting at our residential buildings. Right? You know I'm right. There's one commenter in the last show said they are shooting firefighters at the nuclear power plant, which wasn't true, right? But that was most likely Ukraine public relation firms. So, I mean, they'll get into the comments section, just show up out of nowhere. No one's ever seen it before. And they start saying stuff like that. There's no evidence, anyway, that the plant was targeted. And no evidence that they were shooting at firefighters. Ukraine, and now I won't put it against the country to do that, actually shoot at the firefighters, and then come out and say Russia's shooting at the firefighters, because that's how it's done, right? Now, if you don't understand that or you don't accept that, then I got a solution for you. It takes 1 minute for you. Well, here we go. I'll bring it up for you. It's a 1 minute video of Patrick Clausen at a think tank with the Washington Institute. And what I'd done was I jazzed up the video to help articulate what he's trying to tell you. So he's going to talk about previous wars in the last century or so. And he's going to make a very strong suggestion that the Americans attacked themselves to blame it on a country to get the citizen to go to war against that country they wanted to go to war against. And this is normal modus operatus. And he's trying to figure out how to get to war with Iran if the president doesn't get us to war. It's best if somebody else starts the war. Here we go. Maybe.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked. which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing, which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
It would be best if somebody else started the war. It would be best if somebody else attacked it would be best if America attacked itself and blamed it on Iran. Right? And best if somebody else starts the war. There's a lot of them out there. They're think tanks. Washington Institute is a think tank. And all the media was there. They all knew when to laugh right on cue. Ukraine's called to arms. Civilians are being armed en masse, and there's no precedence in history. Grandmothers are making Molotov cocktails. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Foreign fighters are traveling Ukraine with the vocal support of the British cabinet, the United Kingdom ministers. Western states are shelling out hundreds of millions of dollars on crates of guns and sending weapons to anyone in Ukraine coming from a parachute landing near you. About 20 countries are funneling arms into Ukraine, and most of are members of NATO or the EU. The Dutchies are sending rocket launchers for air defense. They're declaring war. That's the same thing as declaring war against Russia. It's only a matter of days or a week before Russia says so. The Estonians are sending Javelin anti-tank missiles, for goodness sakes. The Poles and Latvias are sending Stinger surface-to-air missiles. NATO is also fortifying defenses and sending as many as 22,000 more troops to its member countries on the border with Russia. A warning meant to deter Russia from further aggression. But this could also be seen as a provocative and risk impossible retaliation from Russia. The United Nations has weathered and managed the diplomatic relations of many wars. Really? You call what happened in Israel, Palestine, managing? You call that the genocide of managing, do you? And Vietnam, where you used Agent Orange for 9 years, chemtrail in disguise, you defoliaged every plant in the country and killed every insect in the country. And Bosnia was crime after war crime, and military still sought to be held accountable. And Iraq and Afghanistan, where you destroyed 50 million people's pensions and patents, where you killed millions. Millions are missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans, where you fired 5.5 million rounds a month for 9 years. All of that to get 10,000 Taliban. That turned into 10,000 ISIL. So you flattened 7 million people's homes in Syria and Libya. And then a couple of hundred of them went to Africa and became 10,000 Boko Haram, where you got millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans to get 10,000 Boko Haram that were the remnants of ISIL, who were the remnants of the Taliban, who were remnants of the Mujahideen, where Russia flattened Afghanistan for 10 years to start that whole cycle off. 10,000 Hamas in Palestine. So you got 5.5 million refugees. You got no problem keeping them out of the country, but you can't get rid of the 10,000 Hamas. Really interesting. About 100 diplomats, many from Western countries, walked out of a speech by Russia's foreign minister at United Nations. 100 diplomats. They were there to have a discussion, and instead of having a discussion, walked out. Because they want the war machine. They got their owners, the weapons manufacturers, gave them their orders. Walk out on them. Don't come to a deal. We can't have a war if you come to a deal. UN warns of growing food crisis in Ukraine. Yeah, 30 million people. 30 million people. Let me try to fix that. 30 million people will chew through whatever food's left when you close the borders down in a short period, right? Because that's the way the system is structured. What makes a war crime and what it means for Russia's Ukraine invasion, the New York Post. Anybody who trusts the New York Post are delusional. They are the military-industrial complex. They own almost all the media at this stage. On Friday morning, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev tweeted in response to Russia's attack on a nuclear power plant. It's a war crime to attack a nuclear power plant. Well, it should be. The only problem there is Russia didn't attack the nuclear power plant. But honesty is not going to get you the war. U.S. stocks fall and oil surges, Ukraine worries mount. Stocks fall and oil surges because the robber barons see an opportunity. Ukraine update, UN Council to meet, safe corridors set up. What's the point of that? Then you got no hostage. 2 more Russian commanders reportedly killed in Ukraine. The Kennedy Center and other sites light up their buildings to support Ukraine. Greater Sudbury continues to stand with Ukraine here in Canada. And Jewish New Yorkers unite to raise millions for Ukraine. Bombardier and Canadian Tire suspend Russia over Ukraine. Russia blocks Facebook and Twitter. It's probably the smartest thing you can do even anywhere on the planet is to block those pigs. Ukraine implores Biden to sanctions Putin's sacred cow. Ukraine. The Prime Minister or President of Ukraine, he's a real social media diva. He's not. He's a public relation firm that is attaching his name to all these pleads. Russia lives on energy exports. So far, they've been exempt from Western sanctions. Yeah, America can't say no to Russia oil, but they probably will. Because that'll punish you, not them. The former head of Ukraine State Energy Company urged the United States, its allies, to unleash punishing sanctions on Russia. It's really interesting. Because he's the perfect puppet, isn't he? The Ukraine president, who should surrender the country rather than destroy it. We got a poll here tonight. We're asking people for their inputs. Should Ukraine surrender to Russia rather than destroy it, is what I should have put there, but I didn't. We got 52%, which is a huge discrepancy from the beginning when it was mostly no. Now it's 52%. So it's basically even. 66 votes. Thousands of animals trapped at Ukrainian zoo as food supply also are dwindling. Roughly 4,000 elephants, camels, gorillas remain stuck at a zoo with about enough food maybe to feed them for 10 days. Commentary. Why is the idea of a neutral Ukraine a non-starter in peace talks? I don't know. Ukraine's armed forces launched counter-offensive, destroying enemy tanks with the Javelin and the Stinger missiles and everything else being shipped into them. They're just going to destroy the country, in other words. Martial law was imposed in Ukraine. U.S. stocks drop again on Ukraine worries and lower for the week. Chinese broadcaster ditches Premier League games due to planned Ukraine protests this week. And so we're seeing it just from every direction that you got to support Ukraine or you're a traitor or you're not part of the team, right? That's what we're seeing. Nobody's allowed to say, you're both friggin' nuts. When do you have to do the moral things? The only one who has the ability to do the moral things at this stage is the president of Ukraine, who should surrender the country. I'll explain that at the end of this show here, why I say these things. Captain will wear armbands in Ukrainian national colors. And stadium screens will show a message saying football stands together. But you're not allowed, if you're a Russian, you're not allowed to acknowledge you're Russian, not allowed to wear signatories of Russia or Belarus or any kind of affiliation with your country if you happen to be born there. And it'll be dangerous to say you're a Russian in a week or so, I bet you. Well, it seems to be already that way, don't it? Representative Doggett, Senator Cruz want to send fighter jets to Ukraine after a call with Zelensky. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to go really good. Mother comes together to build kid-friendly nuclear wasteland. In a nuclear wasteland. This is one of the strangest stories imaginable. In Fukushima, which is just a couple of kilometers away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns, mothers come together to build a kid-friendly community in a nuclear wasteland. It's an actual, anywhere within 100 kilometers is 100% nuclear wasteland. The excrement from worms excrement, 60 kilometers away, was 1.4 million becquerels, atomic decays a second per kilogram. And because a worm eats and excretes like a sea cucumber, right, constantly. In Fukushima Prefecture, first off, that's basically an abandoned area. It's a radioactive no-go zone. They're going to open up around 4. They got 4% open right now. They're going to open up a total of around 12% of the community. You're not allowed to cross the street. You can only drive in the community. You got to go straight to your home and then go inside. You can't hang out outdoors. And when you leave your home, you have to leave the community. You can't stop anywhere in the community. There's a little shop there in that 12%. But this is ludicrousness. The radiation doesn't stop at borders of your community or anywhere else. Taiwan, this is a bizarre story. Taiwan bars local government from banning imports of Fukushima food. Now what's going on is they had a ban for 11 years on 5 prefectures. One of them was Chiba, which is just 20 kilometers from Tokyo, 200 plus kilometers away. Most of the world banned it from 14 prefectures. I'll show you the 14 prefectures. Half of Japan. She's not just Fukushima you got to worry about, it's half of Japan's food was banned in 55 countries because it's a nuclear wasteland. But Taiwan just lifted on the 21st of February of this year, lifted a total ban because they want to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Japan plays a big part in. They're going to poison your people all day long with food from a nuclear wasteland so a couple of corporations can join a trade pact. That's sedition, and that's murder on a genocidal scale. And it's an unbelievably evil thing to do, what they got done. But plans by 5 local governments to ban the sale of the food from the nuclear wasteland, 5 regions affected by the nuclear meltdowns, are unconstitutional, which is what the World Trade Organization said to South Korea, but ended up reversing that decision under an appeal several years ago. Japan took South Korea to the arbiters at United Nations, another subsidiary company of United Nations, which is a military-industrial complex of 193 countries. They're the World Trade Organization. So they got their fingers in every facet of your life, and you don't even realize it. Because it's the big picture, and most people only see the little picture. But all of these organizations, with a stroke of a pen, can poison 30 million people with constantly poisoning them through bioaccumulation of radiation through the food, which is what Taiwan just done. So 5 local governments wanted to ban the sale of stupid radioactive food, and Taiwan says it's unconstitutional. You can't ban the food. You got to eat it and feed it to your children. And if they get sick and die, that's tough luck, because it's unconstitutional to stop Japan from poisoning you. So you don't have a society where it's shit when you see shit like this. Like, what should be going on is that several million people should go grab the fuckers that done that and string them up. And when the police say who done it, you get 1 million people take a step forward and said, "We fucking done it." And the police be like, "Good job. Have a good day." Are unconstitutional. So some prick in the office signed a piece of paper, and now your children are bioaccumulating radiation from every meal. And you think that's acceptable to sit there in fucking silence, do you? I don't. I can't sit in silence while you murder everybody like that. I don't know what you're made of, but I'm not made of shit like that. I'm not a fucking coward. I'm not going to sit in silence either. Shit for brain politicians in Taiwan announced the lifting last month of a ban on deadly food produced in a nuclear wasteland of Fukushima, Chiba, Guma, Ibaraki, and Tochigi. And Chiba is 20 kilometers from Tokyo, for God's sakes. The end of the ban was widely seen as helpful for the country's bid to join the comprehensive and progressive agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in which Japan plays a major role. So if we poison everybody through bioaccumulation or worse, you'll let us join your trade organization? Yeah? Okay, I'll do it. Where's the paper? I'll sign it. And then everybody's now stuck with deadly food because some shit monster signed a piece of paper. You got no idea how upsetting that is to me. 11 years on, diminished populations prompt Fukushima municipalities to join forces. Well, you had to ban in your communities, so you're not paying taxes no more, are you? And so these goblins want to keep their jobs in these communities as officials. And so they want you to come back and pay taxes. Come back and poison yourself and your loved ones, but pay your taxes. And Fukushima is just a couple of kilometers away from an ongoing multiple nuclear friggin' meltdown, which co-hosts the town, and also Okuma, which is on the other side. Fukushima is on the north side, Okuma is on the south side, within a couple of kilometers of ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns that had catastrophic releases for 11 years straight. And they're calling it cripple. I'd cripple the person who said that, by the way, if you ever caught him. Anyway, I'm just going to get upset if I read that. So let's move on. 11 years on, because the anniversary's coming up on Friday, right? So you'll see that a lot. TEPCO to begin Fukushima nuclear fuel debris removal. Really? Well, I'm going to play this clip for you. This is just one of many, many medias that done this, where they're pretending they're 100 feet above the wreckage to your left, which is Reactor 4, also known as Building 4, also known as Unit 4, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdowns. And look at it. There's nothing left. But she's going to pretend, I'll play the clip for you, it's just a short clip. I'll play that clip. She's going to pretend she's in the building 100 feet above the deck to the left.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Does anybody think she's on top of the building in a perfectly fuel pool? Look, I was there looking. It's not the same building. 11 years on, TEPCO begins fuel removal from the buildings that don't even exist. That should be charged with crimes against humanity. Decommissioning is not possible without society's trust. If you don't believe the lie, then how can we convince you that it's done? It's not supposed to make sense. Like 2 Danas, that don't make any sense. You're crazy if you believe these people, that's all I can say. Russia attack on a nuclear plant could lead to a major incident of mass destruction. Yahoo. First off, Russia didn't attack the nuclear plant because Russia's not that stupid. A group opposes nuclear energy use in the country, which is Manila, and the group is environmental group Greenpeace. Greenpeace, of course. Greenpeace has never ever, and I've tweeted this picture out to and multiple Greenpeace organizations, and they refuse to acknowledge that these people are not in a building that don't exist. And that's all Greenpeace got to do is tweet it out and say, look, they're not actually in that building like they're claiming. And it's bye-bye nuclear industry. We wouldn't be in the boat we're in now, would we? I apologize, but I get a little passionate sometimes when I see clearly that this is going to turn out real bad. Oregon legislators clear bills to plan for fuel tank safety. Now, that's not nuclear. That's a 6-mile stretch of unstable soil where they're storing the state's liquid fuels like oil and gas and diesel. And a 6-mile stretch in unstable area, blah, blah, blah. Right alongside a major freshwater supply. What could possibly go wrong? You're going to have endless leaks in that 6 miles, polluting our water, by the way. Japan to provide bulletproof vests and other goods, anti-tank missiles. Improving strippable films, removing radioactive contaminants. I had my little hopes up. We've come across this stuff before. Demonstrating that they are highly suitable for removing radioactivity from multiple surfaces. Yeah, duct tape will do the same thing, by the way. A lot cheaper, too. Probably a better job on top of that. But you can't remove the radiation. Okay, so how does radiation really work? So this little battery here, if that gets radioactive from ionizing radiation from a nuclear... So if that gets radioactive, wherever I lay it becomes radioactive. Once I take it away, it's still radioactive where I had it. If I take another object, put it in that same spot, that starts getting radioactive too. If I take that and move that somewhere else, that becomes radioactive wherever that landed. So does the battery. That was originally radioactive. Wherever I move the battery, that becomes radioactive. Not on a big scale, but it depends on how much we're talking about, of course. It's such an evil industry. Could Ukraine nuclear plant really trigger a blast 10 times larger than Chernobyl? Well, Chernobyl was a brand new reactor. It was a 200-ton reactor. It didn't have any storage fuel pools with decades of reactor cores like Ukraine does. Ukraine has storage pools of decades and decades of reactor cores from 6 nuclear reactors. And there's no way, once it starts melting down, there's no way to stop it. It'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and you can't keep it intact. Now, what's really interesting about Ukraine is they got all their ducts lined up in a row. So if you melt down that reactor, you can't get close to the other reactors, so they'll melt down too. If you lose power to the site, they'll all melt down if you don't have generators. Now, generators are notorious for not working. And they typically only got, bizarrely, only about 9 hours to 10 hours of fuel for the generators. If you don't restore fuel, there's a good chance the reactors will melt down. If you don't get power there immediately, the reactors will melt in about 50 minutes. Once they get past 5%, there's no way to stop it. The rods, you can put the rods that stops the chain reaction, right, that absorbs the neutrons, and they won't be able to stop it after 5%. Tug Electric Power Company holding approval of modification decommissioning reserve fund withdrawal plan persuading to the decommissioning reserve fund system. In other words, TEPCO's taking money, is going to direct a lot of money to fund the dumping of the tanks. Now, the tanks at Fukushima is supposed to be 1,000 of them, but I counted the tanks for 750. And that in 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. In 2014, they had 1,200 tanks. In 2017, they had 900 tanks. In 2021 and 20 and 22, they still only got 1,000 tanks. So they're not filling up tanks because if you fill up these tanks with the numbers that's actually going on there, you're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter, then you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts per tank. And then the tanks need to be a couple of feet thick in order to shield people from the gamma shines, the X-rays, and neutron bursts. And they're not. They're just they were supposed to be temporary tanks. And the problem was that you can't build another tank there if you fill up one of the tanks. And not only that, because the tanks are jimmied together, if you have an earthquake in an earthquake-prone zone, where they had thousands of aftershocks, by the way, the tanks were built to trick you into believing that they weren't contaminating the Pacific Ocean, to fixate you on that. That's what this is all about now. China's part of the scam, so is South Korea, by the way. And if you go to my playlist, you'll find entire presentations on the tanks and the water and that whole scam that we're talking about there. But we're trying to get through this because there's so much of it. There's a long way to go. Ukraine no-fly zone meaning participation in conflict, says Vladimir Putin in one of his shareholder meetings probably. Says Western sanctions against his country following Ukraine invasion are akin to a declaration of war. Yeah? 100. Now that's bad news. Because he's from the Economic Forum, along with Justin Trudeau and Angela Merkel and a lot of current leaders that are well positioned now to turn this into a no-fly planet. Russian president has warned Western powers against imposing a no-fly zone, saying any such attempts by another country would be seen as a step to the military conflict. In other words, go boom, boom. Any movement in this direction will be considered by us as participation in an armed conflict from the country. He added that imposing a no-fly zone would have colossal and catastrophic consequences, not only for Europe, but also for the whole world, which is what we're seeing happen anyway. And what that is the game plan, right? And these are not idle threats, trust me. Putin doesn't make threats. He doesn't play poker at all. On top of that, it says the absence of no-fly zone gives Russia the green light to continue bombing Ukraine's cities and towns, which is what the Americans done for 9 years to Ukraine or to Afghanistan and Iraq. He lashed out at NATO for refusing to impose a no-fly zone over his country, was Ukraine president rather, Warning that all the people who die from this day forward will die because of you cowards. He said from his bomb shelter. NATO is setting no-fly zone, which would bar all unauthorized aircraft from flying over Ukraine. Could provoke widespread war in Europe with nuclear-armed Russia. Well, like, you got all these countries shipping anti-tank, anti-aircraft missiles in, and then putting that up in the newspaper for Russia to find. You really think that's not going to go south on us? Do you? Really? Really? I can guarantee you this is not going to turn out good this week. The United States and other NATO members sent weapons to Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Sanctions that are being imposed are akin to a declaration of war. So they're making a declaration of war of it. It's just about everything. Don't fly, declaration of war. Sanctions, declarations of war. Coughing, declarations of war. War in Ukraine overshadows energy transition. $120 a barrel coming tomorrow. They expect it to go all the way up to $185 a barrel, which means you're going to be paying $12, $14 a gallon gas at the pumps. Or diesel will probably be more expensive for your homes to heat. Yeah, they're going to squeeze the planet, and because you're going to have everybody now liquidating their assets for the majority of the population, trying to keep afloat, and then just drop a few bombs and start the misery machine off. And it won't be just Ukraine on the go, it'll be everybody. So this is the nuclear industry. That's creating an artificial shortage because America is going to stop purchasing Russia's prodigious output. And Russia's now offering cheap oil to other countries. That's creating an artificial shortage for Americans and Canadians. In the mid-2001, when crude was about $70 a barrel, more than 350 civilians confirmed killed in Ukraine so far, United Nations scumbags said. Ukraine herald dead in battle on the 34th birthday. Well, he didn't join that. So if he kills people, he's a hero. If he dies, he's a hero. It's a win-win, isn't it? Poster child for the military-industrial complex. One of Ukraine's youngest military commanders was killed in battle. That's what he wanted, wasn't it? Retired Ukrainian tennis player says he's scared as he prepares to fight the invasion Russians. A lot of his famous athletes from the country bailed immediately. He would too if he's had common sense. New York City's famed Russia tea room. We stand with the people of Ukraine. Yeah, like right now, if you accidentally hold your fingers the wrong way, you're going to get your picture taken. They say, look, he's supporting Ukraine. See that? That's a secret supporting Ukraine. Russia's Fukushima nuclear disaster victims outraged by attack on Ukraine nuclear plant. First off, TEPCO refused to acknowledge there's any victims. The nuclear industry refused to acknowledge anybody got sick, let alone died. The entire nuclear industry refuses to acknowledge the carnage because of the multiple nuclear meltdowns in Japan that is still ongoing. And the numbers we're talking about are just staggering. In the first year, there was 865,000 excess cancers in Japan. In 2019 study, pediatric study, there was 14%, I can't remember, 12%, 14.2% of neonates and infants being born across the country needed open heart surgery. That's 14,200 per 100,000 children being born. These are extraordinary numbers. And if you don't get the open heart surgeries, the congenital malformations, deformities, there's all kinds of brutal illnesses that can develop. It's totally absurd if radioactive substances leaked neighboring Russia could also be contaminated. Really? Here's another plume model from TEPCO of the plutonium, modeled by a different country, but of their numbers, showing plutonium covering the entire planet in just a couple of weeks. Radiation doesn't just cover Russia, it's going to cover the whole planet, in other words. Taiwan bars local government, and we already covered that. 50 academic bodies in Japan issue statement protesting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. G7 to slap tougher sanctions on Russia. Now, G7 is part of G20, which is part of the Bilderberg Group, which means we're going to war. Queen's cousin, Prince Mitchell of Kent, was caught in cash for access, boasting of his ties to the Vladimir Putin regime, handbacks the Kremlin Order of Friendship Award. There he is there with one of his ancestors. There he is there getting his Rusky. Prince Mitchell is a relative of Nicholas II, last Caesar of the Russian Empire, who was overthrown and killed in the Russian Revolution. We need one of them for Vladimir Putin and a few other leaders worldwide, desperately. China tells U.S. don't fuel the flames in Ukraine. China tells United States. I don't like the tone of that one at all, by the way. Blinken says the world is watching to see which nations stand up for the principles of freedom and sovereignty. That's a scary statement right there. China says lunatic Pompeo was the worst Secretary of the State in history for Taiwan visit. Yeah, so the American diplomatic recognition in Taiwan while he was visiting the island, because Taiwan is just, you can see China from Taiwan, right? Taiwan is made up of China, but China kind of let it slip away. And America wants it because you're within eyeball sight of China. So you can carry out sophisticated surveillance, like legally. Children and women taught how to fire machine guns and strip an AK-47 as Ukraine, instead of surrendering, calls up anyone who can fight. You can't fight professional soldiers by teaching kids how to die. Every friend who wants to join in defending Ukraine, every friend, particularly children who don't know any better. Get your picture, stick it up on Twitter, and be cool like that lady there. Go out and die and smile and be a good patriot. 12 gauge in his hand. Come get your guns for free. The U.S. senators to speak with Ukraine president. The U.S. Embassy in Ukraine is calling Russia's attack on a nuclear plant a war crime, despite the fact that Russia didn't attack the nuclear power plant. Vice President Harris is to visit Poland, Romania. He's showing us that picture for. The United States has more than doubled its military presence in Poland, which is a member of NATO, by the way. Poland, on the border, is a member of NATO, which means that if Russia attacks Poland for shipping weapons across the border, then NATO now has a door, right? A major internet backbone company, Cogent, is terminating its relationship with Russia because they're trying to get the pipeline down to a couple of providers That way they can squeeze the internet traffic and catch the Russian propaganda machine, which is what they are. They're propaganda machines. We're concerned Russia could use our network for either offensive cyber attacks or to spread disinformation. Well, you don't own the internet, and that's how it works. Every country does it. Every country's doing it right now. Every public relation firm is at it full time. There's tens of thousands, if not 1 million people currently out there right now with propaganda, right? We got a poll tonight. We're almost through the show here. Should Ukraine surrender to Russia rather than destroying Ukraine? 51%. So it's basically 50%, 50-50. 50% of the people think that the Russian president should surrender, or the Ukrainian president should surrender, and 50% don't. So if you don't surrender, then Russia's going to destroy the country. For sure. Not maybe, but for sure. And who knows where it's going to go after. So if Ukraine president surrenders, what's Russia's next move going to be, I wonder? Right? What pawn is Vladimir Putin going to take off the table if Ukraine surrenders? And now the people don't have to evacuate because there's no more war. There's not really a war. Ukraine. This is why, like, if Vladimir Putin opens up, the war's over. So what he's doing is he's just going slow, idling along, and calling that a war. But it's not. It's not a war. And then Ukraine president claiming he killed 10,000 Russian trained soldiers with no documentation to back it up. Those types of assertions is the boy cried wolf. See, it would isolate the Russian public, Russian hackers who could find alternatives if they cut off the internet, but the public becomes isolated. See, Ukraine's Zelensky has survived multiple assassination attempts. Multiple. Who knows? Well, that's how it works, isn't it? American veterans are headed to Ukraine to join the country's fight against Russia. American veterans are headed to Ukraine. A growing number of veterans, this could be like 5 of them, but the media will blow it out of proportion, won't they? In their battle against the Ruskies. The New York Times reported. If it's from the New York Times, then it's not reporting at all, is it? It's a public relation military. It's the Pentagon. Ukraine President Zelensky has in recent days called for an international legion of folder for the cannons, and many civilians from other countries, such as United Kingdom, have heeded his call. Foreigners willing to defend Ukraine and world order, the new world order. And who's the new world order? I'll show you who. George Bush Sr. says the new world order is a piece of shit. I mean, George W. Bush. There's evil, and then there's Georgie, boy.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
The United Nations is the new world order, according to George Bush. Together we defeated Hitler, so we can defeat Putin too, says Ukraine's president. And Burnaby man in British Columbia is furious the landlord won't let him put up a Ukrainian sign. Yeah, because a lot of people whipped into a frenzy by the mass lying medias. Russia says will not forget Britain's support for Ukraine in the biggest threat yet. Russia says it will not forget Britain's support, sending anti-aircraft, anti-tank missiles, right? The country, state media says the country is furious at sanctions imposed by Boris Johnson government. In a statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry made a thinly veiled threat at the UK and its allies. Supply of weapons, British weapons, to the Kyiv regime. London has made a final choice of open confrontations with Russia. And such a development convinces us once more that Russia-phobia and the aim to undermine the Russian states are integral elements of the British foreign policies, which they are, of course. Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs was the one that was doing the talking. Putin says Ukraine future in doubt as ceasefire collapses. Mommy, what are those guys doing with guns? They're getting ready to die, honey. Russian president warned Saturday Ukraine's statehood is in jeopardy and likened the West's sanctions on Russia to declaring war. So really, the only option is for Ukraine to surrender or World War III. So Ukraine could be a hero right now by surrendering and pull the plug on a New World Order plan. Regina businessmen flying Ukraine flags to show their support. How the hell does that become a headline, see? Ukraine paramedics remembered for bravery, yes. They're incredible, brave people. As it is, you don't need a war to show us that. Canadian artists organizations launches supports. Like, stuff makes me sick to my guts. And that's a fake picture here. Russia Defense Ministry ordered disposing bodies of own soldiers killed in Ukraine. They gave the order to bury killed Russian soldiers in mass graves, and if it's not possible, dispose of their dead bodies. Austin Bakery supports Ukraine with dessert fundraiser. How did we ever evolve to be this stupid, I wonder? Selling macaroons with Ukrainian flag colors. That's now patriotic, see? It's patriotic now to send your piggy banks, your children's piggy banks to the military-industrial complex so they'll give weapons to Ukraine. Civilians killed as they flee destroyed town. Horrible stuff, isn't it? They don't give a frig. That's what weapons do. They kill. That's why they made them, because they kill. They didn't make them so you can have a fear fight. Made them to kill. International Agency for Atomic Energy, the IAEA, the scum, degenerate scum, Rafael Grossi says it's vital to safety that all staff can work free of undue pressure at the nuclear site in Ukraine. American Express to suspend all operations in Russia and Belarus. Amid growing pressure, Visa and MasterCard have suspended operations in Russia. So just about every organization now is turned on Russia. Around 3,000 U.S. volunteers willing to come to Ukraine to fight against the Ruskies. And 16,000 foreign volunteers are going to Ukraine. Foreigners also have a right to enlist in the armed forces of Ukraine under a contract on volunteer. You don't get paid to die. Ukraine officially filed a lawsuit against the Russian Federation with UN International Court of Justice in The Hague. But they didn't, did they? It was done pro bono by a team of lawyers in the United States, wasn't it? Russia's indoctrinating children in the schools, explaining Ukraine war is a liberation mission, which is exactly what George Bush Jr. and scumbag from the United Kingdom done when they invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. The exact same thing. Closing the skies over a nuclear facility is the only way to prevent new tragedy, Ukraine Ministry of Defense. IBM completely withdraws from the Russian market. And a town near Ukraine's nuclear power plant is handing out anti-radiation sickness pills. It doesn't stop the radiation from going in your body, just in your thyroid gland, which normally will take it and mutate it into radioactive hormones and distribute that throughout your body. Yay. But all the other radioactive elements will just go in, sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, and start killing you. No radioactive contamination in Saudi Arabia airspace. So the fear-mongering, even though they knew it didn't get attacked, they knew it didn't melt down, they knew it wasn't releases, yet 2 days after, they put out that headline. U.S. working with Poland on deal to provide Ukraine with fighter jets. And Canada disaster. Trudeau departs for Europe to meet with allies. Public relations firm or the military, one or the other wrote that one. UNESCO, aka United Nations. UNESCO is United Nations. They're UNICEF, they're everything, man. Fears Ukraine, harm as Russia culture backlash grows. As Russia culture backlash, the entire media worldwide is demanding that everybody spit on a Russian flag every morning when they wake up, for God's sakes. Ukraine is home to 7 United Nations World Heritage Sites. Russian nuclear power export, will they stand the strain? Because Russia's building reactors everywhere around the world, or wants to. Nuclear radiation, iodide pills in high demand. Okay, so does anybody remember Gorbachev? He dissolved the Soviet Union, and he gave a speech when he dissolved the country. But dissolving the country, instead of giving the country to another politician to fix, you got rid of everybody's pensions and everybody's identity and culture and everything else. It was literally the most cowardly thing you could do, most self-centered. It's the same thing as the president of Ukraine is doing right now, refusing to surrender, to throw in the towel, to wave the white flag. I'm just going to read you a couple of excerpts from the speech, and then that'll be the end of the show. I'll come and do a shout out, I guess. There's plenty of everything, land, oil, and gas, Gorbachev said of the Soviet Union, and other natural riches. And God gave us a lot of intelligence and talent, yet we lived much worse than developed countries and kept falling behind them more and more. And the reason could already be seen. The society was suffocating in the vices of a command bureaucratic system, doomed to serve ideology and bear the terrible burden of the arms race, the military-industrial complex, and it had reached the limits of its possibilities. He said, we have not learned to use freedom. And the totalitarian system, which deprived the country of an opportunity to become successful and prosperous, was the military. We live in a new world order. An insane militarization which mutilated our economy, our public psyche, and our public morals. And the most damaging thing about this crisis is the breakup of the statehood. And today, I am worried by our people's loss of the citizenship of a great country, and the consequences may turn out to be very hard for everyone. Now, if that's not applicable to Ukraine and to the president of Ukraine, because that's what he's doing, dissolving the country by extermination, by flattening the country. And history showed us many, many, many times that hanging on to power for a few extra days is how you destroy a country. And this is what the president of Ukraine is doing. He's doing everything but what's right for the country and the people. And my goodness, to destroy everybody, he's destroying everybody's pensions too, see? By not surrendering. Surrendering is how you would end the war. Japan surrendered. Many countries have surrendered throughout history. There's no shame in surrendering when you can't win. The big shame is not surrendering when you can save tens of millions of people. Because you check on the president of Ukraine in 5 years' time, he's going to be living in a great big mansion with all the amenities, a huge bank account, and all the luxuries, and everybody else will have nothing, including pensions. He won't, though. He'll have it all. Just like Gorbachev is today living in a castle. So we're going to close the poll down, I guess. And do a quick shout out. It was an exceptional long weekend. A lot of work this weekend. And so we got 72 votes. Should Ukraine surrender? Why wouldn't they? Is the question, really. Because of NATO. 73 votes. Thank you, everybody. It's a 53% yes. 53% yes. 47, basically 50-50. I agree with it. I'm not an expert on this either. I'm just saying, I'm looking at 30 plus million people. What's the point of not surrendering when you won't have a country anymore and you'll have 30 million victims? How is that a win? How is that a win? Well, it's not. Okay, so we're going to end the poll there. And poll ending. I'm going to come up to the most recent, the first comment. Well, I don't really get access to my comments. I only get about half of them on my side. So I'll go back to the second half of the comments, I guess. Obsolete Optics, Thinker, Chelsea, Organic Slant. I'm not saying Russia's the good guy, no. Or Ukraine is the bad guy at all. Organic. I'm just saying what are the options? I know Zelensky is a scumbag. I know Russia's a scumbag. But and I know the people are generally good people of both countries. They're victims of their establishment, obviously. Robert Jade Brandon. Good night, everybody. James Lucid. Hey, James. Dana Nasana. I'll turn up the music a little bit. Good night, everyone. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Because we got a I know. And so this whole conversation is just a weird conversation, folks. I'm trying to be impartial, but you got so many headlines, and all these headlines got these nuances. And all these nuances should really be addressed much better than I'm going to do, because there's so many of them, I can't keep up with them. Tommy Time, Television, Robert. I'll put some fucking eye shades on here. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Not that I give a shit. Timo, Ori. Good night, everybody. I'm just looking for names to give a quick shout out to. I'm not reading comments on purpose. I'm trying not to. Just scroll, and say goodnight, and go bang my head into a wall, have a cup of tea, get up in the morning, go to work again. And just remember, I'm not perfect. Never was, never will be. I'm scrolling. Just looking for any new names to give a quick shout out to. No, I'm just saying, I know no one's going to surrender. But I had to ask the question because nobody else is going to ask that question in media. I'm not going to have a headline anywhere in the near future saying, should Ukraine surrender rather than get annihilated? Peaceware. We're almost down through the comments. Hope everybody... There's no proof that Ukraine attacked their own nuclear plant. Absolutely. That's the standard modus operatus, though, for most countries, right? Richard McCann. You can't have a conversation if you don't bring it up. You know what I'm saying, folks? Blue Jay Outpost. Stan. I'm providing the documentations for my assertions, but also I'm entitled to take all the research that I've been doing for a very long time and subjects and use examples of that when I'm talking, right? I can't avoid it. So, like, most wars are staged events, for instance. And so there's so many facets that go into what I'm talking about. It's hard to articulate everything I'm saying of why I'm saying it, and I shouldn't have to. I think I've proved over the years that I care about the planet and the insects and the birds and the mammals and the animals. Andrew B., good night. I think Ukraine, that's my personal opinion, right? I think Ukraine should surrender before they're annihilated. Shane Clark. And I don't blame anybody for being upset with me. It's a difficult subject. Port Angeles. Two Danas. Near Rad, Uloft. Did I get everybody? I think a lot of people misinterpret what I say personally. There's a big picture out there, and I can not always do a perfect job of explaining that. You can't, right? Any war is agony. It's a misery machine. That's what a war is. And so I'm pretty sarcastic lately. I apologize for that. And because I'm wallowing in this excrement all day, every day. And then I sit here for a couple of hours and try to tell the story. Doesn't really do it justice. And I'm a little bit despondent that I see a very bad thing is going to happen to our planet and to everybody that's very vulnerable. And I see that now coming true in the last week or so and escalating. And I'm worried sick about everybody and all the species and the future. And I've earned that right. But I'm concerned in a whole different way now because of the escalation and the rhetoric and the bullshit from all the media and the propagandists and the public relation firms. I have a lot of animosity lately because of these conflicts. They bring out an absurd amount of public relation firms. There's 29,000 military uniforms at the Pentagon. All they do is public relations. And they're cruel and vicious and hateful, despicable and sadistic and sneaky scumbags. And I've been infiltrated for many years by these groups. And just one of them can do a lot of damage, right? I don't know, Dana. Try another browser, maybe. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night at the same time. I hope this doesn't escalate, but we know it's going to. And this is why I say tonight that the president of Ukraine should surrender because there's no option. Right? NATO can give you all the weapons you want. You're not going to beat Russia. All you're going to do is beat the shit out of all the victims in your country. Hugs for everybody. God bless. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Hugs for you and your loved ones, your friends, your families, your pets, your animals, your community, your planet. We'll see everybody on the other side in about 25 hours or so. Have a great night.